Welcome to this PowerPoint video presentation on assessment principles. Let's get started. Before we kick into the principles of assessment, first you have to understand that not all assessments are the same. In the NZDF, there are two forms of assessments we do regularly as part of training. These are formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment measures or tracks how well learners are progressing, for the purpose of providing them feedback and guidance to improve their performance. You'd use this type of assessment during your lessons or building up to a summative assessment so that you can help learners really think about what they still need to learn or work on before they can do a job task unsupervised. Whereas summative assessment measures a learner's competence with the job task for the purpose of judging whether or not they will be able to do the job task unsupervised. Now, this is that point where they should really be able to do the job task, because if they can't, then they shouldn't be allowed to do the job, or else it puts everyone else at risk. It's really important to remember what each one is for, because this should help you figure out when you can give your learners some breathing space and provide them some coaching, or when you really have to draw the line about their being able to stand on their own 2 feet. So, whenever you are developing, implementing, and evaluating assessments, there are 3 things you must always keep in mind and base your decisions or judgments on. These 3 things are validity, fairness, and reliability. These are what's known as the principles of assessment. Now, what does each concept mean? Starting with validity, this is the most important principle of assessment. This is about whether or not the assessment or elements of the assessment test what is meant to be tested to the required standards. If the assessment to be administered does not satisfy this principle, then as an instructor, you should notify your chain of command as soon as possible. Depending on how misaligned it is to the learning outcome or instructional objective it's meant to assess, you may even have to seriously consider canceling the assessment or postponing it to another time in order to rewrite the assessment. Next principle is fairness. This is about whether or not the assessment advantages or disadvantages a learner or group of learners. Some important considerations to note here would be that when applied to formative assessments like confirmation activities for your lessons, fairness is also about giving your learners equal opportunity to really get into the activities so that they can receive valuable feedback on where they are at and guidance on how to improve their performance. Which brings us to the third principle, reliability. The assessment must be able to be carried out consistently between independent assessors. Now, this principle isn't as critical to formative assessments that are to do with individual lessons, but becomes really important when it's to do with running summative assessments. The assessment tools and marking guide, as well as standard operating procedures around the administration of the assessment, really has a huge impact on the reliability of an assessment. So then, how do you ensure that an assessment you run in the NZDF, regardless of whether it's a formative assessment or a summative assessment, is valid, fair, and reliable?